Welcome to the Spa Girls podcast, the self-publishing podcast for authors. You're in the right place for the best writing, marketing, and publishing advice, plus interviews with industry experts and best-selling authors. I'm Cheryl Phipps.
I'm Shah Barrett.
I'm Wendy Vella.
And I'm Trudy J. Welcome. This is another episode of the Spa Girls podcast. And this week we have Tammi Labrecque with us. Hello.
Hey, Tammi.
Welcome, Tammi. Well, welcome
did I say your surname correctly? I'm suddenly
You
realizing.
did.
Oh, well done, me. That was a surprise. We had you back in July 2018, and so this is your second appearance. Yay! And Tammi is a newsletter expert, so she's going to chat to us all about newsletters and how you should set them up and all those kinds of things. But first, Wendy is going to read out your bio, and then we'll get right on into it.
Tammi Labrecque is an indie author, a mailing list whiz-kid, and the author of the best-selling non-fiction books for authors Newsletter Ninja and Newsletter Ninja 2. Tammi lives in Central Maine with 3 spoilt cats, 2 neurotic dogs, and dozens of fictional characters that keep her awake at nights. When she's not penning awesome books on how you can become a Newsletter Ninja 2, she writes under a variety of pen names across several genres, including urban fantasy, thriller, and LitRPG. My favorite line from the blurb of Newsletter Ninja is, "Imagine having a large list of happy readers who devoured every email you sent, or launching a book and activating an army of fans who did the selling for you. You could be that person with the help of Newsletter Ninja." Welcome, Tammi.
Thank you.
Yay.
Who wants to start?
Trudy's gone.
Sorry, I was
completely.
My favorite bit about that last little bit was actually my little note. So it wasn't part of the bio, but I do like that line from the blurb of the Newsletter Ninja, because that's awesome. That's kind of what we want, right? Like that's the ultimate ideal for newsletters. So but let's kick off with what have you been up to since 2018 when we spoke to you last? What exciting things have happened in Tammi land?
Well, it's been a weird few years.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. 2018. I don't remember when exactly we spoke, but I'm sure it just continued as I was in 2018, which means overworking, doing too much with too little sleep, which led to some real problems for me in 2019, if I'm honest. Kind of had a legit kind of nervous breakdown, and I quit working. I didn't work for like 18 months. It was a really rough time.
Wow.
So that was kind of how my 2019 was. There was a whole bad situation. I canceled an ebook that was supposed to come out in January of 2020. Hilarious side note, there is a video on YouTube of me canceling, like explaining to people why I was doing that. And I said something to the effect of like, but I feel like I'm really coming back around, and 2020 is going to be like my year. And there is a comment on that video where someone is like, "Oh, my sweet summer child, this is so hard to watch, knowing what's coming."
Yes.
So then there was 2020 and 2021, and I didn't leave the house much, which gave me a lot of time to think about my business, revamp my business. And I really came back very strong at the end of 2021. I took a ton of marketing courses. There's nothing funnier than like taking courses on how to create courses. Like that's it's both meta and absurd on every level. But it was genuinely helpful because I had been doing everything by instinct. And it turns out a lot of things you can't do very well by instinct. So sort of revamped my courses, worked on a different book because the one that got canceled is still kind of a bugaboo for me. That one's supposed to be on automations, and it's harder to write about than it is to just like teach in a video. So, but I'm working on it. Wrote a second book about reader magnets, which is called If You Give a Reader a Cookie, Newsletter Ninja 2, If You Give a Reader a Cookie, which I loved writing, and that got a really nice response, which is good. And just basically getting like the ship in order. To be honest, I don't know, maybe this will help your audience. It certainly would have helped me to hear it a couple years sooner than I did. To be totally honest, there was really a part of me that was really torn about the idea of being the person who sells author services and instead of being that 6-figure author that we're all saying we want to be, right? I was fortunate enough to meet and take a class with the amazing Becca Syme, who I'm sure you all know. And Becca really helped me to get my head on straight with regards to, you know, what is enough? How can you be content with what you've got going on? How can you leverage your strengths to really optimize everything? And I feel, knock on wood, like 2023 is really going to be pretty strong for me.
Oh, stop it. Stop you right there, because you've done that in 2019 and you jinxed it.
A plague on us, right? I'm sorry. If I bring a plague down upon us, my apologies. But I've just seriously, the last year has been really transformative, and I am feeling awesome about everything newsletter related. So
excellent.
That's brilliant.
Bring it on.
Ask me anything. I'm ready.
Oh, I'm so excited. All right, we will. Don't you worry about that, Tammi. All right, so okay, let's just whip through the basics, and then we can kind of dig deep into some of the reader magnet stuff. But so I want to go through why do we have newsletters? Like, what's the point? Why should everyone listening to this get a newsletter? Argue the case.
Okay. I feel like I've argued the case enough that probably everybody doesn't need me to, but there's always one guy, right?
Yeah.
One stalwart holdout.
Yes. And I don't say guy because it's always a guy, because it's not, as it turns out. They come in all varieties. But so for that guy, you need to have a newsletter because it's the only thing that you truly own that belongs to you. That's the most important part. I don't want to come at it from a fear-based perspective. Like a lot of times in the past, what we've said is like, what if Facebook takes your account away? And that is a consideration, certainly. Or, you know, what if this, what if that? And all of that is tragic. And it is good if you have your newsletter to fall back on. But just the honest truth of the matter is that is the piece that you can pick up and take anywhere you want to go. You can behave on it however you choose. There are no regulations except for the legal ones, obviously, but nobody is going to police what you talk about or how you talk about it. It allows you to speak to certain segments of that list. Whereas if you just have a Facebook group, you got to throw it at everybody. Not everybody is on social media. If you're trying to build a following there, God bless you. And I'm a big fan of like cross-pollinating, kind of, you know, pull all your social media people to your newsletter. And then maybe you tell your newsletter to go talk to you on social media about something to just kind of keep that all going. But you can't just build solely there because not everybody is there. Also, of course, not everybody is on every platform. Everyone tends to have one they like, right? So now do I have to show up on Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and Pinterest? And now everybody's in Mastodon and Hive, and Mastodon has different servers. And I got stuff to do, guys. Like I got books to write, right? So I can't be in 6 or 10 or 45 social media platforms. If you have a newsletter, that is the hub, that's the place where people can get all of the best information from you. So to me, it's a total no-brainer.
Yeah. And what about
100%.
things like, so you can launch straight to your engaged readers, you can keep them engaged between launches, things like that? Like, is that stuff that's
it's really important, because if people are following you, let's say Facebook, that's the one that we're most familiar with. And of course, you know, good ads platform has groups, that kind of thing. If you're going to be an author and you want to be on social media, that's usually a good place to start. But if you're on Facebook and you're posting to your page or posting into your group, lots of people aren't going to see the things that you're posting. So that's kind of obnoxious. It doesn't really lend itself to long form writing, really. I mean, some people do write extraordinarily long Facebook posts. And frankly, I'm the sort of person who reads them, so I get it. But most people don't, you know? And it's not something that allows you to have, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't allow you to have a lot of continuity. So if I'm going to launch a book in June, I'm going to start talking about that book, let's say in January, and I'm going to talk to people almost like dominoes, right? In a row. I'm going to have certain things that I want to cover in each newsletter that leads up to that launch, and they build on the ones that came before. Here's some snippets. Here's a cover reveal. Maybe there's a pre-order, doing some really hypey stuff in the last month or so before. And that all builds on the newsletters that came before it. You really can't do that on Facebook. There's not a way to keep people engaged in that exact way that allows you to build real launch momentum. And then of course, if I want to launch and I want to take advantage of the Amazon algorithm's tendency to reward what's the word I'm looking for? Increasing sales, I guess, for lack of a better word, over a period of time. Amazon's algos change constantly, as you know, and we can't really see them. We can only kind of see the results of them. But the best guess is that if you have sales that increase exponentially, 2 sales, 4 sales, 6 sales, 12 sales, 24 sales. I'm being very modest here. Some of y'all sell like 1,000 books a day. But if it increases over time and there's that upward slope on your sales graph, right? The algorithms notice that, and that's a trend that will make them start sort of hand selling the book to people who it is appropriate for based on your categories and your also bots and that kind of thing. If I want to engineer that to try and make that happen, I can do that with my newsletter. I can segment my newsletter and I can send it to either the most engaged people first or the least engaged people first, or just send it to a small segment and then a bigger segment and then a bigger segment. You can do all kinds of like stuff at launch time that helps you to get a little bit more visibility. You can directly ask people to leave you reviews. You can directly ask people to recommend it to a friend. You could like do all kinds of really cool stuff that, again, is just so hard on social media because you got to be on 10 platforms and people aren't going to see unless you pay for it. And it's just a whole mess. It's all newsletter first for me, for sure.
Yep, absolutely. Brilliant. All brilliant arguments for the case for newsletters.
Thank you. I've had a few years to work them out.
So the next question I have is, so you get a newsletter but they're not all created equal. So what should we be aiming for? Like, how do we will talk in a minute about how to set it up, but this is just kind of like, what's the ultimate? What is a good newsletter in your opinion?
So a good newsletter is one that has a really interesting, very clicky subject line. I'm not talking about clickbait. Whatever your subject line indicates really does need to be in the email as well, for sure. But it has a really intriguing, really clicky subject line. The best way to do that with people is to either be funny, which not everyone is funny. I totally get that. Or to kind of invoke their curiosity. The best example I can give of the curiosity invoking piece, and it's really easy to do with your own newsletters as you're writing subject lines, is I had a client who in one of his onboarding emails, he wrote mysteries, and there was a subject line that said, "Is Knives Out the best movie of," I don't even remember what year that came out because time has no meaning, 2020, I don't know. "Is Knives Out the best movie of 2020? And I said, "Oh, take the title out and say, is this the best movie of 2020? Because if someone's scrolling through their inbox and they see the question with the movie title in their head, they say yes or no. And unless they're feeling particularly argumentative about it, they don't even really necessarily need to open the email. They've already got an idea of what you're going to do. You're going to make a case in there. Whereas if you say, is this they're like, I don't know, is it? What movie does he mean? And they open the email, and from there, you get to have that conversation with them. Or I guess it's more of a monologue with them, but we encourage dialogue in our emails. So that, to me, like having some kind of mystery there, the word "this" is really powerful. But without being like, you don't want to be hacky about it. One quick trick, or you won't believe what I think the best movie was. Like, that's nonsense. But just a simple question: is this the best movie of 2020? Really works well. So curiosity or humor are two great ways to get people to open. That's your first piece, subject lines. Internally, like inside your newsletter, I think there are a couple of important components, if you will, or details. I don't know, bad at words. You'd think I wouldn't be because I write books. So the first thing is going to be newsletter length. That's the thing people ask me about all the time. How long should my emails be? And of course, the answer is the very frustrating, it depends, right? As long as they need to be and no longer. That's not helpful. But you never want to waste people's time. You can send a super short email and it can be really effective because it just has one very simple goal. For example, we were talking about launches. If you're doing a whole bunch of launch hype and you've really prepared people for the fact that a launch is coming on a certain day, that launch email is going to have like 2 sentences, right? Book is here. You can grab it at this link. Enjoy, whatever. Like, you can send a very, very simple email that will do a lot of work. You can send super long emails and people will read them. People will tell you that they don't read long emails, but that's not true. They don't read boring emails. And that's the difference. So for email content, the thing I tell people most of the time is write it. Just write your first draft like you would a story or a book. Go ahead and write that. Then go back through, take out the stuff that doesn't need to be there, put in a lot of white space, which makes things feel like more readable, even if you don't change the length at all. Read it out loud to make sure that it sounds like you, and make sure that it has some sort of coherent through line, that you're not like jumping all over the place, right? If those things are all present, then it just sort of naturally people will read through to the end, which you have not made too long because you took out anything that wasn't necessary. And that way you can get them to, convert. I kind of hate that word at the end, and do whatever it is that you want. Click on something, look at something, just reply. Whatever it happens to be. So the length is really important, but only in the sense that you just want to make sure that it is not any longer than it needs to be. I'm a pretty good example of somebody who tends to send pretty long emails because I'm a bit of a jabbermouth. And it is what it is. But I do go back through them. Believe it or not, the people who receive my emails are like, really, that you cut those? I did. It was longer. It was longer the first time. David Gaughran is an example of somebody who sends very, very long emails. His emails are super detailed. There are subheaders. I'm like getting lost. I'm taking notes, but I read them all the way through to the end because they are always full of incredibly useful information.
Yeah.
So that's with length. It's just as long as it has to be. And then of course there's content. People always want to know, what do I write about? And there's a lot of that in the first Newsletter Ninja book, actually, just sort of general ideas for stuff that you can put in, because that does seem to be a hard piece for folks.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. That's awesome. So I just was curious about some of the metrics though. If you're thinking about your mailing list as a whole unit, and you've got say 1,000 people on there, but 3 people open it every time you send it. What is that about? Like, that's not a successful newsletter in my mind.
No, that's a problem.
Yeah. So maybe, what is a successful? What are you looking for?
If you have really poor metrics. So first of all, before we ever talk about open rates, we have to talk about the fact that open rates are basically a vanity metric, and we should probably never have been relying on them, but we really cannot rely on them now. Okay. It has always been the case that there are people who open and you don't see them. People with various sorts of privacy related, I can't remember the name of the email service that is very specifically privacy based. That's embarrassing. But there is one that just never shows when people open your stuff. It never has for like a decade. Proton Mail, that's what it's called. Proton Mail is super private and does not allow tracking or anything like that. If people have education like .edu addresses or .gov addresses, a lot of times those strip things like images and tracking and HTML. There are people who read in the mythological preview pane. Is anyone using Outlook? Because seriously, but apparently a few.
Yeah.
I think Trudy just raised her hand. Yeah. So if you click on an email and it opens over there, it doesn't load necessarily all of the content and you can miss a pixel. So always people who are opening that you don't see. And now with the advent of Apple's mail privacy protection, you've got a bunch of people who aren't opening, but it looks like they are. And that's even more diabolical. So thanks, Apple. Rather than try to hide that information, they've obfuscated it. And that is actually the smarter way to do things, because never let it be said that the folks over at Apple aren't like super smart. So, depending on your provider, you may be able to see that. I'm in Active Campaign because I have a lot of fancy needs with Newsletter Ninja that authors, like indie authors, don't have. But Active Campaign shows me these are Apple people. Don't rely on this open number. And that is useful to know. You can also see on your own list who is using various platforms to open. Most of the providers will allow that, but some of them you have to dig, and some of them it's not possible to just be like, can you show me what percentage of my people? So you can start making some calculations. Basically, we all really need to start looking at clicks a lot more than opens. Click rates are always lower than open rates, of course, because it's easy to read an email and then do you really want to do the thing? Maybe not. So that's fine. But generally speaking, if you, let's just say, disregard the Apple people because they can't be relied on right now. If I see people come to me with lower than like a 40-ish open rate, I know I just went right back to talking about open rates when I said we can't rely on them. I generally want to try to optimize for people like that. Now, you'll hear people say the industry standard is 20%, but that industry is like not our niche of the industry. So they're doing a whole different kind of marketing. Our marketing is fan base built. Our marketing should be people who are like super excited to hear about you, rather than people who like are signed up to get, you know, a notification about I don't know, a sneaker or what have you. Like, I don't want anybody to be complacent about that 20% number, because that's real low for an author as far as I'm concerned. So I want to see you around like 40%, notwithstanding Apple's folks. And generally speaking, that does not mean that 60% of people are not opening, because of course, not everybody opens every email. So if you ask your provider in the other way, if you pull a report that says how many people haven't opened for, like, say, the last 10 emails, it's not going to say 60%. It's going to say 40 or like 35, because you've got people that open here and there. So I want to keep it around like 40. That's really, really helpful as far as I'm concerned. I also want to see a lot of click through though. And the thing about authors is that we don't want to be marketers. Believe me, I did not want to learn how to be a marketer. It was a really rough situation, and I did not enjoy it. The good news is I brought back most of that intel and translated it for folks so they don't have to, because it's gross out there. So what we want to be doing is we want to be giving people things that are really interesting to them and that have really good payoff on the other side of the click. And since we don't sell a whole ton of, you know, little widgets or whatever, and we're not selling high ticket courses or coaching or whatnot, we're talking about $2.99 ebooks, often in a series, specific to a certain genre or niche. Like, we've got these really specific needs for what makes people want to click. And again, it comes down to fan basey stuff. You know, science fiction people are going to click different things than romance people. And frankly, my romance readers are going to click different stuff than a romance reader who writes dark romance or cowboys or sweet romance. I don't know why the animals are fighting in the other room. My apologies.
Can't hear anything.
Can't hear anything.
Well, I gave it away then. So it's the dog and the cat. So that was interesting. So so since it is so sort of nichey and you know, based on your genre, your subgenre, kind of your whole situation, it's hard to say what exactly will work for people, but it's generally, you know, adjacent content, behind the scenes stuff, videos that are relevant, casting images for, like, if you have, you know, Henry Cavill is the hero in your head of your romance, you can send them to a picture of that. That doesn't work so well in military sci-fi because they don't care. Also, military sci-fi captains don't look like Henry Cavill. They're like grizzled and, you know what I'm talking about. They're too old for this shit, that kind of thing. So like, there's a whole range of things that you can do. The best thing that people can do to figure out what kinds of stuff is working, what kinds of things are working, is probably to go and subscribe to some of the really big selling people in your genre. Not necessarily the person that's at number one today, because you don't know if that's a flash in the pan, but the people that you've noticed are always at the top of the charts. God, I always name check her and I feel so bad, but she's probably already paying for a pretty big list. If you're writing contemporary romance, you should be checking out Lucy Score's newsletter. She's excellent at it, and it's not an accident that she is really good at that, and she also sells incredibly well in the store. Those two things go hand in hand. I'm not saying the newsletter is the cause, although I'd like to, but the fact that she has such an engaging newsletter does help her to stay at the top, because Amazon's not great about the recommendations.
She's engaging.
Oh my gosh,
so funny.
She's amazing,
funny
and
and
she's
clever.
so funny. She's so funny. And I did notice, like, during the worst doldrums of 2020, I'm not sure actually if she's doing it right now, because I'm not keeping up very well with people's newsletters. I'm subscribed to quite a few, as you can imagine. but I know that during the worst months of like 2020, she was sending at the bottom of every email, like just a list of good news, just things
good
that
news.
would
Does
cheer you up.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so great. What a good
And
idea.
also her brother will come in and do it, or a dad.
Yes.
And like,
So
it's
she's
just
got
a
this
family thing.
cast of characters, right?
Yeah.
People that you are accustomed to seeing. It's a whole situation over there in the newsletter, which also dovetails nicely with what's going on in her Facebook group. She's really cross-pollinated that beautifully. Like, she gets it. And so go find the people in your genre that are performing really, really well consistently, and then go check out their newsletters. Obviously, you don't copy, but you are inspired. You take inspiration. That's my best advice for that.
Does it always kind of work like that though? Like, I just sometimes wonder whether you get someone who's a big name author and then they happen to have a email list. Are they going to be doing best practices in email that is going to work for someone who isn't a big name author? Do you know what I mean? Like someone like, I don't know, Tessa Bailey on TikTok does really, really well. But it's because she's Tessa Bailey and everyone loves her book. Do you know what I mean? So is there a...
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that that's also a pitfall of trying to rely on social media, is that I think that people are big on social media, have lots of followers on social media, but get lots of responses or, reblogs or whatever, duets over on TikTok, get a lot of that because they are already famous. Those are places that it is really hard to get visibility if you don't already have some visibility. Like, bringing in cold traffic from social media can be super, super hard. I think that newsletters are, to some degree, exempt from that. You can write an exceptional newsletter, whether you're writing it to 100,000 people or 100 people. It doesn't really matter. It matters in terms of how many people you're sending to the buy button, for sure. But it doesn't, you can still be really awesome to the small segment of people that you have. And that means that you keep those people. It's not ephemeral like social media is. So they're not just constantly moving on to the next thing. Your emails arrive as expected at a regular interval, and they read them. And if you are doing the fan building stuff, they want to stick around because your emails are interesting, your books are good, and in between those books, you're keeping them interested and invested in the back catalog and the books to come. That is all so hard to pull off on social media, where people have the attention spans of gnats, myself included, for sure. And where, as you're saying, like, it's easy to be big on social media when you're already famous. That's not hard. Like, Jennifer Aniston joined Instagram and had like 57 bazillion followers in a day. That didn't happen to me, weirdly. Like, go figure. So I think that the people who, because the people who are selling incredibly well on Amazon and also have good newsletters, they didn't start the newsletter like the day that they hit number one on Amazon. So you can see that probably the newsletter played a part in their sort of ascent to the top, if you will. Again, I can't say it's all the newsletter, and I really wish I could. If you have a good newsletter, you will be number one in the store. I cannot say that. Don't pull that as a pull quote. I cannot say that. But I do find that there is definitely a correlation almost always. There are exceptions. There are some unicorns here who sell incredibly well, and then I check out their newsletter and I'm like, whoa. But it's not often. I do not. Maybe when we, I thought you meant examples of the bad ones. I was listen, I'm not going to do that, Trudy.
No, that would
I'm
be mean.
nice.
I mean, good ones, examples of good urban fantasy or fantasy ones, just for
good
me.
ones for urban fantasy. Off the top of my head, I don't. I'm not writing. I took this whole year off from writing. So I have not been following. The only ones I'm getting right now are probably romance, and I have a bunch of thriller author clients all of a sudden out of nowhere. Everybody wants to be big in thrillers, I guess, like police procedurals, but I've not been following urban fantasy. However, I will look it up and I will shoot you some names.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
But as always, head for the people at the very top of urban fantasy. And then of course you got to be careful to make sure you're getting the right flavor, because urban fantasy is one of those that's I almost use the word polluted, which is hilarious because I love romance and write romance, but urban fantasy has kind of got there's a subset of that that's kind of just paranormal romance disguised as urban fantasy. And I generally don't read a lot of that. I like romance and I like urban fantasy, and I like a little romance in everything, but I like Patricia Briggs urban fantasy, right? Not like whatever. So just be careful that you're getting the exact flavor of whatever you're writing, and then go to town, check out the big sellers and see what you can do.
Yeah.
See what they're doing.
So I'm going to ask a question that new writers or new self-publishers are going to be asking now, and it is going right back to the very basics, and that is, what are some recommended hosts for your newsletter? Should they just do a BCC and Outlook email to folk? How do they?
Sure, absolutely. Just send a BCC from your Gmail account. What could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
So my stuff. Don't pull that as a pull quote.
No,
my standard recommendation for people is usually MailerLite. Not that I don't have nitpicks with them, and I think the rollout of their new platform was a disaster. Are you listening, MailerLite? But even aside from the fact that sometimes I get pretty sassy about them, and sometimes I get sassy with them, which is funny. I think they're the best kind of intersection of price and functionality. For a pretty reasonable price, you can do a lot of really cool things, and they have some very robust automations, especially considering the price point. And I'm saying that as somebody who's on ActiveCampaign, so I know from automations, man. So I generally, that's kind of my blanket recommendation is MailerLite. We've all got a story about when they screwed us. It's just, it is what it is. But in terms of deliverability and in terms of kind of functionality, they're actually incredible for that price point. If you go to, what's it called? Email Tool Tester. Virtually certain that's what it's called. And I think it's a .com, but I don't know. Anyway, if you search it, twice a year, they do kind of a testing, and they see who's got the best deliverability. And MailerLite is always surprisingly high. Sometimes it's number one. You have to dig down a little bit because the first graph you come to doesn't take into account things like, did it go to promotions or the inbox? And that is important. That does actually matter. So in terms of inbox deliverability, that's part of why I stay with ActiveCampaign. But ActiveCampaign is super pricey. And if you're just starting out as an author, you do not need to do that. Like that's varsity, not junior varsity. So I pretty much always push people to MailerLite. I have a link. It's just newsletterninja.net/MailerLite. That's an affiliate link. But if people sign up with that affiliate link and you have an issue, you can always drop me an email and let me know that something's going on. I'm having trouble moving. I don't know how to set this up, because I try to really nurture the people who sign up as an affiliate with me so that they'll become paid subscribers, and then everybody wins.
Absolutely.
Which I like. So yeah, definitely MailerLite is what I recommend. If you have graduated from that and you have a whole ton of pen names, a bunch of different subgenres, reasons to parse and slice and segment your lists a lot, you might want to move up to something like an ActiveCampaign or a ConvertKit, but those are definitely things for down the road for authors that are a ways on their journey.
You're not mentioning my favorite, which is Mailchimp, and I know it's expensive, but I was with them from the start when they used to have sweating apes when you press the send button, which sadly is no longer since they've been sold.
I forgot about that. Oh my God. I forgot.
They hooked me with the sweating ape. And now I'm stuck, just saying.
I literally forgot about that. That was, I probably joined Mailchimp in like 2014.
Yeah,
so
same. I was there from 2013.
Forgotten. So the bad news is that Mailchimp's deliverability is not great.
No, it used to be the other way around. It used to be if you want good deliverability, but anyhow.
The problem is that they have the largest, well, there's a few problems, but the major problem for them is that they have the largest free tier. So that's where your people who don't know what they're doing or are outright scammers are going to go. And so best practices can go by the wayside over there on Mailchimp. So they suffer from that. Their architecture of their database allows for double billing if you have people on multiple lists, which is just a huge pet peeve of mine because I have like a million lists, because I parse people in this specific way. So I know, what they've bought and stuff. And I don't want to do it with tags because I'm using them for something else. So they have that architecture problem. And what's the other thing? Oh, it's not insurmountable, but they continue to charge you for unsubscribes unless you specifically archive them. And not some people don't even know that, which I feel like if you're going to roll that out, you probably needed to really make sure people understood it. So yeah, I'm just kind of like, Mailchimp, but you can still do most things as long as you don't want to have really complicated sequences or anything. You can do a linear kind of onboarding sequence. You can do all this stuff with Mailchimp. I'd rather you were on Mailchimp than don't have a newsletter. That's
exactly. exactly. And you can still do the free test. I think MailerLite is a lot more intuitive, so I would direct people there. But I just, you get kind of in the groove of a system that you're familiar with, and
you do. I have a lot of people who've told me I should probably move to ConvertKit, and it does sound very appealing, but I'm like, I'm not learning something new. Nope. And that's a funny thing to say. I'm actually going to I have some time set aside in December to go through ConvertKit with a friend who's on it. And so I can at least teach people, even if I don't move, because currently when someone asks a ConvertKit specific question in a course or something, I often don't know the answer.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to learn it.
And I think
but I probably won't move because I don't,
No. And I just think that's an important point for anybody that is new to this, and it is kind of a whole new thing. Just give yourself a little bit of grace when you're learning, no matter what provider you go to. MailerLite is, I would say, very intuitive. It's kind of drag and drop, and if you can use Word, you can do it. But it just, everybody goes through a learning curve. Just saying, nobody is born into this world knowing how to do it.
Right. One thing I've been saying to a lot of people, I was just at a conference actually in Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and somebody in my group posted and said, this is the takeaway from Tammy's talk today. Please give yourself permission to do things imperfectly rather than not doing them at all. It's okay. There's no mistake you can't recover from. There's no thing that you can't pivot and start doing differently. You can change lists, you can change providers, you can start sending more or less often, you can rebrand. Just give yourself permission to do things imperfectly and to take one step. If you don't have time to write a 5-email welcome sequence, because who the heck does? Not me. Write one, just write the one email and call that good for a while until you get to the next one. Do it imperfectly, because perfect, as they say, is the enemy of done.
That's very, very true. So I just want to break down. So we kind of know, so you go to MailerLite, you sign up, you get that sorted. And then how do you get people to join your mailing list? Like where are they coming from? And this is a question we get quite a lot, actually. Right.
Well, you just go to the Warrior forums and you buy a list.
Again, another quote for
now
us
you
to
know.
post up on another quote. Yeah.
So just to reiterate, for anybody that is not getting the sarcasm here, that is absolutely not what you're doing.
Never buy a list. It's literally illegal.
Don't go to the Warrior forums either.
For anything ever. So here's what you do. And it's tough. One of two things. Let's think of subscribers. So, wow, you've got me. Do you see how I'm like physically getting up on my soapbox? So we have traditionally, I think, in the author community, thought of readers as kind of falling into two camps, right? And we called them organic and non-organic. So there's the people that just sign up because they love you, and then there's the like losers that you have to bribe because you're a loser. Well, I don't want to think about them that way. And I didn't really, I think, formulate it until I was writing the Reader Magnet book. But to me, I think the camps that they fall into, honestly, are just readers who know you and readers who don't. In either case, you can bribe someone. Often you have to bribe your readers who like you. They get to the end of your romance and you're like, do you want an extended epilogue? Is that organic? Not really. You did bribe them to join, but they are readers who already knew your stuff. And as such, you can treat them a little bit differently, and they come in via different avenues than readers who don't know you, right? So for readers who do know you, it's all the usual stuff. Put it on your Facebook, put it on all your social media. Let's just shorthand social media. Have that link everywhere. All social media behaves differently. So it should be like pinned to the top of your Twitter, but in your Facebook group, maybe put an image and a really easy to remember URL in the header. Only because things that are pinned in a Facebook group sometimes are hidden if you're on mobile. Like everything's different. So figure out the best practices for whatever specific thing it is you want to do, and make sure there's really easy for anybody who first follows you on a social media platform to find the sign up. Because if they come to social media and decide to follow you, they probably read a book, and that's why. Obviously, back of book links are really important. I cannot stress this enough. Please do not send people from the back of your book to any third-party platform. I want you to send them to your website, because again, that is something that you control. This is probably the biggest mistake I see people making, is that they send people from the back of a book to a book funnel page. And I always say this line, and then I think to myself, why am I cursing my friend? But if Damon Courtney gets hit by a bus and book funnel goes down for good, all of those links in the back of those books are dead. And that's very sad. God forbid a year down the road, for whatever reason, your one book takes off on TikTok and you're like, man, I wish I could get all those subscribers, but you can't because that link is dead. You can't change anything in a book that someone has already downloaded. Obviously, going forward, you're not going to send them to the bus accident guy. So, however, that said, Damon also always pops up to remind me when I say this, that with BookFunnel, you can have custom domains so that instead of sending them to a BookFunnel URL, you send them to a URL on your website, which if the worst happens and BookFunnel goes away, you can at least reclaim that subdomain and have it direct somewhere else. It's still under your control. And that's the important part. So please don't send to a third-party platform. And I didn't mean to single out BookFunnel because there are tons of them. It's just that's the one I use. Don't send to a third-party platform, but off that soapbox. So back of your book, obviously inside your Facebook group, in everywhere, just everywhere that anybody might read a book and go, oh, I like her, and find you. That's really important. Still totally cool to bribe those people. But sometimes you don't have to, sometimes they finish a book and you're just like, do you want to get my newsletter and know when my next book is coming out? And they're like, hell yeah, that's also awesome. If you don't have a reader magnet, you should get one. But if you don't have one, you can still entice those people who liked your book to sign up. The bribery just works a little better because some people either don't think they're newsletter people only because they don't know how awesome your newsletter is, or they're not going to sign up except if it's to get something, just because we're all in like inbox overwhelm, right? I mean, me especially, because I end up subscribed to like everybody's newsletter. So that's what you do with people who know you. Just make it easily available in all the places they might otherwise find you. However, that kind of growth, what we've kind of always called organic growth, that kind of growth of your existing readers is slow. That's the slow way, right? Because you can only get, well, at the top end, as many subscribers as you have readers. And of course, you're never going to convert 100% of readers. So that can be really slow and can take a long time. So for me, I'm really strongly encouraging people to actively reach out to engage people who don't know you yet. And the best way to do that, obviously, is with a reader magnet, which I can talk about in a sec. But it needs to be a very specific kind of reader magnet, because obviously your extended epilogue for your romance isn't going to entice anyone who hasn't read the romance. That doesn't make any sense. And you can do that in a variety of ways. You can sign up for bundles and promos at BookFunnel, at Story Origin. You can buy Facebook ads and send people to your reader magnet. I actually have a not really a student because he didn't take a course. He's just in the Facebook group, a horror author that I know who's having a tremendous amount of success with Facebook ads, which if you listen to the conventional wisdom, everyone will tell you it's too hard to sell horror in the indie sphere. Turns out it's not if you're really smart and you work really, really hard. So I know people who are successfully doing Facebook ads. Mark Dawson does Facebook ads, has a whole course on it, in fact. And a lot of those go not to his books, but to reader magnets. So that's one thing you can do. You can do newsletter swaps, individually with people that you reach out to, people that you've networked with. This is a good reason to go to conferences or virtual summits or whatnot. You meet people in your genre and you might be able to do some swapping. Generally speaking, just in terms of manners and politeness, if I want to ask somebody to send my reader magnet to their list, I don't make a sign up mandatory, because that's basically just saying, will you give me your whole your mailing list, which is kind of not nice. That's maybe too big of a favor, but I will say they don't have to sign up, but will you share this reader magnet with your people? And then if you, first of all, write an excellent reader magnet, and then second, really nail that call to action at the back, you will see sign up through that from people. And they were probably more likely to download it if they didn't have to sign up. So nail the cover, nail the description, make it something they really want to open, make it super readable, and you'll get a really high sign up rate from that kind of thing. I'm trying to think, where else would I put my reader magnet for people who didn't know me? Those are the only ones that are coming to mind. I'm sure I forgot something really obvious that someone will tell us in the comments. But I think probably the most important thing is to kind of make that flip that switch in your head and stop thinking of the non-organic readers as like something bad. It is okay to go out there and just wave this awesome reader magnet in front of people and be like, hey, you want to join my list? Because when they join, you can, first of all, and I always recommend that people do, encourage them to unsubscribe when they sign up. That sounds really counterintuitive because you just worked really hard to get them. But I always give people a big unsubscribe button. If you're just here for the free book, no problem. I love free books. You could just click here and you won't get any more emails from me. That will help with the quality of those subscribers right away. I think people's main fear in terms of list building in that way with strangers is that they're going to get a bunch of the much maligned freebie seekers, right? But I'm also a freebie seeker. I love a free book, but I also pay through the nose sometimes. Like Nora Roberts is really expensive, you guys. Those books are like $16. Sometimes I'm like, why don't you go indie? And then I remember, because she's rich, she doesn't have to. So you'll get a much higher quality of people if you give them that kind of the option to just leave when they first come on. But then the people who do trickle through and make it to the end of a welcome sequence and move onto your list and read about your books and all the other cool content you're sending them. I will tell you honestly, from my data, when I look at people 6 months down the road, so these are people who came in and they stayed for the 6 months, I cannot tell the difference between an organic and a non-organic subscriber. Their open rates are similar. Look, I just used the organic versus non-organic. But that's not what I meant. The readers who came because they knew me and the readers who did not know me when they started. I can't tell the difference between them. They open at the same rates. They click at the same rates. They truly are not distinguishable. So you can create a super fan from someone who doesn't know you. Of course you can. Everybody didn't know you at the start. That's my soapbox on that.
Do you ever send them different emails at the beginning when they're like,
I do. If somebody signs up from the back of a book, they just get like a hearty welcome. I'm so happy you're here. I don't give them the giant unsubscribe button because I figure, I mean, they came and signed up. They must want to be here. It's really just the people who haven't met me yet, who might just be signing up because they saw $0. Those people, they may not be my readers. So I give them a strong idea of what I do. I always default to cowboys and billionaires. Apparently, I think that's the only two kinds of romance. But so I write about, alpha billionaires who this, that, and the other thing. And then all the people who love a cowboy romance are going to just like bail. They probably bailed anyway when they saw the cover, but just in case, they'll know for sure. Okay, I definitely don't want to be here because this is kind of all she writes and I'm not really into that. And they take off. And you can, of course, signal to them exactly how you can get really deep into your niche to drive away people who don't subscribe to that niche.
Yeah.
What about the group promos that people do? So I don't know whether I should name them or not, but like book sweeps or
I love book sweeps. I don't have a ton of experience with all of them. One of the main pitfalls of the fact that I took the whole year off from fiction and, spent the 2 years before that in my house having a nervous breakdown, is that I haven't had a chance to experiment with some stuff that I do see like my clients and my students using. I love book sweeps. I can definitely wholeheartedly recommend them. And the reason actually kind of will help your people to decide what other ones might be good. The reason I love book sweeps is twofold, actually. The first reason is that they are very nichey with their promos. So if you join a book sweeps promo, it's very rarely just contemporary romance. That does happen sometimes. That's where someone belongs, but they will have a billionaire romance, a dark romance, a, paranormal romance, or even nichier than paranormal, whatever the sub niches are beneath that. They get very granular with their targeting in terms of their promotions. So when you get, at least the last time I used it, you get a spreadsheet from book sweeps, right? They just send you a spreadsheet of names and email addresses. When you get that spreadsheet, the people on there are people who definitely not just like romance or sci-fi or whatever, but your particular flavor. So that is really good. That's the first step in not getting a ton of unsubscribes or having a list full of people who won't like you, is to find the right people in the first place. The closer someone else's books are to yours, the more likely their readers like you. The second reason I love them is that Ryan, well, I mean, I'm sure it's not Ryan. He's got a few people over there, but Book Sweeps sends, they send the list of emails through like an email validator. There's a whole bunch of different ones. I feel like I asked Ryan which one he was using and he told me and I immediately forgot, like instantly. I'm sure I forgot it in the moment, no less. But there's a bunch of different email validators basically that you can input a list or even an individual email, and it will tell you if that's like, is this a good email or do we have some kind of like blacklist that it's on? Because what happens is that sometimes people just put in the wrong email, right? Something that's like gmail.com or gmail.con or whatever. BookFunnel incidentally fixes those on the fly, which I think is just delightful. Damon really understands like authors and what we need. So if someone puts gmail.con, BookFunnel just fixes it. But Book Sweeps, it will catch it and they'll correct it. So you're not importing any junk emails right away. And it will also identify like spam traps and things like Postmaster and garbage ones that just are gobbledygook. So you get kind of a clean list as well, which is nice. Because if you import a spreadsheet of 500 people and like 400 of them are broken or unsubscribed, MailerLite's going to be like, hey, what's going on over there? What are you doing? And nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. So I like that a lot. And those are the things that you're going to want to be looking for if you're doing any of those kinds of promotions, is like, how granular is the targeting? If you want to do a group promo on BookFunnel or Story Origins, don't do science fiction, do military science fiction, right? Don't do romance, do cowboy romance. Like, be as granular as you possibly can, and then make sure that those names and addresses are vetted in some way. And if you have to maybe pay a little bit to do email validation yourself, even, you might want to think about that, because when people sign up for freebies, a lot of times they do sign up junk emails.
That's good advice, actually.
For real.
Yeah.
But that's a really good way to choose. And then when you do things like the cross promos on BookFunnel and Story Origins, keep like forgetting Story Origins name, which is rude. When you do those, you're of course kind of setting those up yourself and choosing who it is that you want to promote with. So you just make sure, check out those authors. If you get a list and like, a bunch of them bounce, maybe you don't want to promote with that author anymore. Like, you just kind of figure it out as you go. But what you want is granular and not junk signups.
Yeah.
So you don't want to sign up to one of those promos where you don't know the authors, that maybe they don't have a very good,
I probably would not. Actually, I guess I would sign up to a promotion with authors I didn't know, as long as it was through a platform like Story Origins or BookFunnel that I knew just generally doesn't keep bad actors around, to be honest. But I wouldn't do it with something that I didn't have a recommendation from other people, so that I knew that it was a good platform to be doing it on. And I definitely wouldn't do it like on the fly, like off a platform. If somebody just approaches you and is like, hey, you want to do a thing? I'm like, I don't know. Why don't we set that up on Story Origins? Because then there's also, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, there's something that you can do if it turns out to be terrible. If it's all just a bunch of nonsense and it's all bot emails and stuff, you can email Story Origins and say, Evan, this author, look at this trouble that they've caused us. They don't want that on the platform. Evan and Damon don't want their platforms messed up like that. So I tend to stick with the biggies.
And when you're talking newsletter swap, are you sort of saying offering a reader magnet to that author to give her a freebie, or do you ever recommend doing like that traditional swap where I mention your book and you mention my book?
I think that the swap is nice because you give something, they give something, everybody gets a little bit of a benefit. Sometimes honestly, you're asking a little bit for a charity rather than a swap, because maybe you don't have a very big list, right? In which case, also, if you just started writing romance and you have 500 subscribers, don't ask Lucy Score for a newsletter swap, because that's not going to happen. But you can look at the people who are kind of right in your area, people who are ranking like you or asking the same questions you were asking a month ago. You can, in like reader groups or author groups, you can approach people that are kind of at your level. And then in that case, it's more even. I'm also a big fan of maybe just reaching up a level if you can tell like what's going on. And then just approaching it as, if you want to send this to your people, it's just some free content for them and there's no sign up. If all it means is putting a link in their newsletter, a surprising number of people are totally okay with it. Like, we are blessed with a community that by and large is not interested in pulling the ladder up behind them, which I love about this community. And I always look kind of side eye at anybody who is like, there's room for everybody. It's okay. You can't write enough books to keep them happy, I promise. So that's the kind of the attitude that I foster with my students and my clients. And I found that it's helpful. When one of us does well, we all do well.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Probably a little Pollyannish, but
I'd like to ask about the regularity. Do you believe in having a set time a month on how many times a month to send it out? Or do you just send it when you have something interesting to say?
Well, are you talking about what I think you should do or what I do? Because those are very often two different things.
Right.
Best practice. Let's go with best practice.
The joke among my reader group, my author group is it's another one of those do as I say, not as I do things from Tammi.
Mm.
Yes, sending regularly is a great idea. Same day of the week or same general time of month or whatever, only because people then know kind of like when to look for you. And they do come to expect it more in a weekly sense than a monthly sense. If you're sending every month, probably people aren't like, it's the 15th, but maybe they are. I don't know. Depends on how big a fan they are. Nora Roberts sends me a newsletter a couple times before each in-depth book comes out, and you can bet I go looking for it because it's got the first chapter in it.
I
which
love
I'm
the
gonna
way you
read,
talk about
and I'm
that
gonna be
as if it's Nora herself personally sending you that email.
It is
which-
not. It is her publicist, Laura, who is also lovely. But Nora writes it, so credit to her. I look for it. I look for it every month. Not every month, but twice a year, because that's how often those books come out. I look for it, and I want to read the first chapter and then get mad because I don't have the rest of the book. It's this whole game I play with myself. And I want to do that. So I do go look because I know, generally speaking, when it might arrive. But if I knew for sure, for example, that it comes on the first of the month, 2 months before the book, then I would be there on the first of the month. So it doesn't hurt to be regular. But this is another one of those situations where we don't want perfect to be the enemy of done. And if you can't keep to a rigid schedule for whatever reason, then just go ahead and send it when you've got it and let people know. I send somewhat irregularly. Maybe you should add me to your safe list so you always get my emails and like that. The only thing I'm really hard and fast on in terms of regularity, scheduling, if you will, is that you've got to send once a month or more. You definitely have to send at least once a month. If you're outside the 1 month mark, you start to take some real hits, technologically speaking, in terms of reputation and deliverability, because just the long span between emails causes your deliverability to go down a little bit. So if you send at least once a month, there's kind of a 30-day reset penalty or something. That it's not like you go back to 0, at least I don't think so, but you will notice that there's definitely better deliverability and reputation if you send more often. Also, don't be afraid to send too often. I have yet to talk to an author who's sending too much. Y'all are definitely erring on the other side of sending too infrequently. There are studies that show that people who sign up for brands and celebrities and authors, of course, for newsletters from people that they are really excited to interact with, have said that they would be happy to hear from them once a week or more. I can't send 2 emails a week. Give me a break. But if you want to send to your people every 2 weeks or even every week, they will be happy to see your stuff, provided, of course, the first thing that we talked about, they're not too long, they're not full of fluff, they're definitely engaging. You got to send good emails or they don't want them at all. And the more frequently you send, the more that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that people are opening and clicking and engaging, and your reputation stays high. So as often as you are comfortable with and have something to say.
What about
Good answer.
personalization? Does that make a difference?
Personalization actually does make a big difference, which I hate talking about because I don't like personalization. I get annoyed when my name is in the subject line, which is just a weird quirk of my brain. Just there's always a moment when I go, you don't know me, like stop tricking me, right? Yeah, Cher's got her hand up.
Yeah, me too.
It really annoys
I'm
me.
always, it's because I spell things wrong, or the capital T and a capital R, and it reminds me that I didn't type it right, and then they just have it forever, and I'm like,
Oh,
Well,
that would be very annoying.
My biggest pet peeve is when they screw up the tagging, and so instead of saying Dear Sharon, it will say Dear brackets first name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Three brackets.
So that is a real issue. That's a genuine concern. However, I am the person who wrote in the first Newsletter Ninja book, and it is the most highlighted sentence in that book. You can see like popular highlights if you turn them on your Kindle. Do not make business decisions based on your own consumer behavior.
So true.
And it is really true. So I did not personalize emails until last summer was the first time I started doing it. And it was because I was reading an article probably on validity.com, I think, which none of you should go to because you will find it extremely boring, but that's where us email people hang out. And personalization increases open rates somewhere between, depending on who you ask, 25 and 50%.
Wow.
Those are big numbers, right?
Holy
so even
moly.
and I was like, really? Like, are these people dumb? I got so mad. Like, who are these people who are opening because I put their name
I
in?
want to see
Like,
their name.
right?
Is it in the
it
subject
doesn't-
line or is it in the
in the
actual-
subject line?
in the
Names
subject
in the
line?
subject line increase open rates by somewhere between 25 and 50%. And when I say that to authors, they invariably go, I don't believe that. I wouldn't open. And I'm like, I know, dude, but apparently
Yeah.
that people who are smarter than me and have actually tested it instead of just thinking about how it makes them feel say 25 to 50%. So I gave in and I started doing it. And you know, it's true. It really does
Damn
work.
it.
Ugh.
I wouldn't say 25%, but also my open rates are really high because I have this kind of meta situation where people are trying to learn about newsletters. So just artificially, I get a lot more opens because people are like, I better read this. I might learn something. My fiction rates are not that high. And so I didn't see quite that much increase with Ninja, but I did see an increase with the Ninja list. So I think that you should
There you
do it.
go.
You should not do it every time. And
Okay.
since we are all hopefully trying to make our subject lines fairly short, you probably want to only do it with your shortest subject lines because we're thinking about mobile, of course, and only a little bit shows. I have noticed that the marketers whose email techniques I really respect, generally speaking, when I'm scrolling through the inbox, I will notice that theirs are the ones that fit on my mobile device. Like the whole thing is there and I don't have to try to wonder what's on the other side. So we're trying to keep them kind of short, but I also break that rule sometimes because, you know, hey, I'm long-winded. What can I say? In that case, though, you're going to want to front load whatever the most important information is, and then maybe throw the personalization at the end, or this is the one that you skip it on. Personalization inside helps a lot too. It helps with calls to action. It just kind of helps. It gets people's attention when they're reading, they notice their name and they focus in on that paragraph. If you think people might be kind of skimming and you really want to like focus them in on the thing you're about to say, their name will do it. We're monkeys at heart, you guys.
Yeah.
And
We're just
respond
animals.
to stimuli. We respond to stimuli, and it is what it is. So I'm a big fan of personalization. And you don't just have to personalize their name, although that's of course what you would display, but you can also send conditional content or dynamic content, I think is what they call it in MailerLite, so that you can make a block and it only shows to people who are tagged as coming from a certain place or who have shown interest in a specific subgenre or, you know, whatever, have read a certain series, you know, because they came from the back of that book. It is possible to have dynamic sort of personalization of the content itself. So you're sure you're not sending things to people who don't want them or shouldn't get them.
Yeah.
Without having to send 2 emails, which is very annoying.
Sure. So another question on subject line, emojis, yes or no?
Yes, they also increase open rates. I don't remember what the numbers are, but they definitely do. My rule in terms of subject line emojis is that I try to make them relevant to the thing that I'm saying. So, you know, robots for robot stuff, gremlins, zombies, what have you. The number one emoji in terms of increasing open rates is the poop emoji. Do with that what you will. That may or may not be appropriate. I will tell you the other day.
I know that poop screams romance.
Do you know what?
Like
I will
just
tell
saying.
you the other day, I sent my first poop emoji subject line ever. And I've been doing this for a while now.
I think I got
sent
that email. Is it for your newsletter?
It was just after Black Friday. So I did not really send anything for Black Friday. I sent something on Sunday, but it wasn't Black Friday related. But I sent an email. Actually, it might have been the one on Sunday now that I think about it. And I had actually sent it to a friend beforehand because I said, can I get away with this? And the subject line was, your inbox a shit show. And he said, well, number one, you're going to you might get spam filtered, which is true. That's a good point. Also, some people just might be kind of offended. Like not everyone loves swearing like I do. But also he said, might I remind you that a very wise person once said the poop emoji really gets good open rates. And I was like, I cannot believe I missed that. How embarrassing. So all credit to my friend Voss, who told me to use a poop emoji instead. So that's what the subject line said. Inbox a poop emoji show. Big
and
opens,
I saw that
guys.
one. I saw it. And this is an example of why you
Did you
shouldn't do
open it?
That's
the question.
But I was like, oh, it's a bit risky to use a poop emoji. Oh, I'm not sure about that. Like I was
people love a poop emoji
because you use the poop
Again,
emoji. Oh
we're all animals. We're all basic.
Yes, we totally are. And I got a bunch of replies from people who were like, yes, it is. Oh my God. More like Bleak Friday. Am I right? So yeah, it was pretty bad in everybody's inbox. And so that made it stand out. It was very short. The what's it called? The pre-header text said like, I'll make it quick. So people knew there wasn't going to be my usual, nonsense inside. And it really works out really well. So yes to emojis for sure. Little books, little gifts, little hearts, little, whatevers.
Christmas trees.
Yes. Christmas trees are great. Something relevant always works.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we must be rocking in towards the end of the show.
Yeah.
I can't believe I could be talking to you for another hour, Tammi. But just quickly before we go, I've got just a bit more of a question on content. Like, how do we? I don't know. How do we know what kind of content to? I mean, you kind of talked about it, but like for me, I don't have romance. I've got urban fantasy stuff. Like, how do I know what I'm supposed to be doing for content? What can I do to figure that out?
So this is the number one thing that people ask me. It's always been the number one thing people ask me, even more than which provider should I use, which is way up there. And I have traditionally, for real, for like 4 years now, every time someone says, but can you just tell me what to put in my newsletter? I say, you know what to put in a newsletter. You're an author. You know how to tell a story. First of all, rude. Stop telling people that when they're clearly asking you for help. Like, I've been very hand wavy and dismissive about it. And so I would be like, hey guys, I made this course on automations. And people would say, that's awesome. Can you just tell me what to put in my newsletter? And I'd be like, no, but I made this cool course about reader magnets. And they'd say, awesome. But can you tell me what to put in my newsletter? And I'm like, okay, fine. I will tell you what to put in your newsletter. So I did actually just start. By the time your people hear this, it will be public. It's in beta right now with my newsletter, with my mailing list people, a membership, which don't everybody run away and turn off the sound, because I promise this is not $47 a month and a waste of your time. What I'm doing in there is giving people both templates for emails. So like the structure of an email, here's the pieces you need to assemble kind of in a modular fashion. And then also here are some prompts and topic ideas and content that you can do. There's monthly, like sort of calendar content. Apparently sometime this upcoming month, there's a National Monkey Day. So that's fun. So I do some of that kind of just like whimsical sort of observances stuff. There's stuff about holidays and all of that, but then there's more generic, like just general topics you can talk to people about. And then there's some really author specific templates, like book recommendation templates, asking for reviews, what to say if you've ghosted people, all that kind of thing. And they drip out gradually as people come. I didn't want people to log in and there's like 50 templates. They're like, oh my God, what do I do? Or they just take them all and run away. And the thing is, if they do that, I'm kind of really out because it's super, super cheap. It's $8.99 a month, which is pretty good. I tried to make it $9. And again, we're all just animals. I was like, no, $8.99 sounds better. So that's what it is. And actually, you know what? If you send your people to, let's see, newsletterninja.net, let's say just Spa Girls. How's that? That's easy.
Perfect.
If they go there, I'll give them a discount. We'll knock it down to like $4.99 for the first month. And that way you can go in, kick the tires, see if it's the sort of thing you might like. My goal is that people will be able to come in and go, okay, I grabbed a template. Now I'm going to put these little modular items in. The bad news is you are going to have to write your own emails. It's just, I believe in that down to my core, and I'm never going to change my mind about it. But my hope is that with that whole framework there, it becomes a lot easier to do. So, but to answer your question for people who will not want to join a membership, the basics for content, first of all, I want people to remember that you are sort of the foundation of this newsletter, right? So if people are joining, it's because they like something you wrote, and they therefore are kind of ripe to like you if you talk to them about yourself and sort of your books and why you write them and so forth. I'm bad at like catchy acronyms, so I'm calling this 3 W's and an H. That's fun. That doesn't come out to anything you can say. So I don't know what to say. Maybe someone can help me with that, because I could obviously use some help. But at any rate, what I want you to tell people when they first arrive to your newsletter, whether they've read you or they haven't, if they're joining the newsletter, this is the point where they'll get to know more about you. I want you to have a few stories kind of back pocketed that you'll dole out over, say, a welcome sequence. And those are who you are. That doesn't have to be super private, like not your social security number or your address, but like, generally speaking, this is, I'm married, I'm a mother, I live in the country, just, stuff, who you are, what you write. That's really important, obviously. And you want to be as specific with that as you can for people so that they can know if that particular flavor of whatever is for them. So again, not just contemporary romance, but sweet romance for ladies who are over 30, that kind of thing. Or for college age people, or science fiction for, I don't know what people write science fiction for because I don't write it. It's one of the few genres I don't even try. So give them a good idea of what you write. The third thing is why you write it. And that's actually really important in terms of getting people to identify with you. So usually the reason you wrote a book is because that book didn't exist, right? It's Maya Angelou, I think, right? If the book doesn't exist that you want to read, you have to write it. So that's why you wrote that book, for a reason. And it wasn't just because I think the world needs another urban fantasy. It was because you wanted to tell a specific story. So if you tell people why it is that you write what you write, I didn't see this and I wanted to have books that were that. And so that's what I write. That's really helpful. It helps people to sort of just get an idea of you and what they can come to expect. And they will sometimes be repelled by your why. I write epic fantasy with LGBTQ characters because I wanted to see characters that were like myself in urban fantasy, and I don't know why I just mixed genres, because obviously that's not going to work. Pretend I said the same genre. And obviously bigots who don't want to read anything with gay people in it will be like, and they'll run away. Good riddance. But the people who are like, oh, I also would like to see myself represented in this genre I like, or I'm an ally and I'd like to see fiction that reflects the world around me. Those people are going to be more inclined to stick around, to pick up your books, because they can identify with them and they understand about them. And then the fourth thing, the H, is how you write it differently than anybody else. That I intentionally say differently and not better, because we're not having a contest here with our people who may well have referred these readers to you. So probably don't start bad mouthing folks, but you do write it differently. You have a different slant. You're from a different part of the country. You have different influences. You used to write this other genre and you brought some of that sensibility to this genre. Your heroines are always like X. Your heroes never do Y, right? There's something special about the way that you write. And even if you're not a unique snowflake, go ahead and put your stake in the ground anyway. No one's going to reply and be like, actually, so-and-so writes that too. That's not going to happen, and you're fine. You can think of it as how I write it differently than most people, if that'll make you feel better. But those are the four things I want you to have: who you are, what you write, why you write it, and how you write it differently than other people. That creates an entire author persona for people that they can then identify with, and they're going to want to continue to get emails from you and buy your books. And as a very pleasant side effect, it makes you really recommendable. When someone can say, oh, you've got to read this book. The author is like this, and she writes this kind of book because of this. You've given them the language to explain to people what's special about you and your books. And that is super powerful in terms of recommendations from other readers. And the one thing that holds true all these years that I've been paying attention to publishing, which is literally since I was like 19 years old, the one thing that sells a book more than anything else is a recommendation from somebody who's you respect. End of story. So make yourself recommendable is really important. So that to me is the beginning piece of content. I want you to talk about those things as you introduce yourself to people. And I want you to remind them of them as they go through and just receive your campaigns. Occasionally, you're going to remind them, I write kick-ass heroines, or I write, LGBTQ fantasy, or whatever it is that you do.
Yeah.
That's really important. And then the other content, of course, is just the usual stuff. Really good questions, other books in your genre, book recommendations are very powerful, authors that you love, TV shows that you're watching, pictures of characters, your pets. Pets are huge. Just the usual stuff that you would talk to anyone about. If you can write your emails kind of like an email to a buddy, that's about it. Just whatever you would share with someone that something you find interesting. Here's a cool story I saw. Here's an interesting article I read. Here's a picture that made me smile. Content is really simple to me. So it's always hard for me to give that advice. Again, not a cult, but if you are a follower of Becca and the Clifton strengths, my number one strength is ideation. So when people say, what do I talk about? I'm like, what do you talk about? Like, are you serious? Like, just everything. Here are 20 ideas. So that again is part of the reason that I started the membership, because I was like, I mean, like, are people just going to pay me to just have ideas at them all the time? And everyone went, yeah. Oh, okay. Cool. I get it then. So that's what I'm doing.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
Well done.
I love that you're able to use your ideation and actually.
Becca's been telling me for like 2.5 years, I know there's a way that you can leverage your strengths to be successful in this way. And I'm like, no, I can't, Becca. What do you know? Becca was right.
Yeah.
She's always right. Damn it, Becca. Oh, I wish I had my little sign. We got damn it, Becca signs at the conference.
I love it.
Hold it up.
So that's us. I think we've kind of gone over our hour, and I would love to keep chatting, and there's so many more questions I have, but I'm just going to have to cut us off right there.
I'll come back anytime.
Come back.
Thank
That'd be
you.
awesome. And so if someone wants to find you, where do they go? Where's the best place?
Just start at newsletterninja.net. It's kind of a dumpster fire because just whatever. I'm not thrilled with my website these days, but if you go there, the information is fine. And there's links to all of my courses, and there's links to both of my books. We're selling the audiobook direct on the website. So that's the only place you can get the audiobook for book 2. Book 1 is everywhere. You can sign up for the newsletter. Obviously there's a link there, but it's /newsletter. How inventive. There's just all kinds of cool stuff, and it all just starts right there, and you can find whatever you need.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And where can we be found, Shah?
Well, we can be found on Newsletter Ninja at newsletterninja.net /Spargirls. Just Spargirls, just without that very generous offer from Tammi. And we can be found at spargirlspodcast.com, and we can be found on patreon.com /Spargirlspodcast.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Awesome.
And thank you, Tammi, for joining us in the spa.
Thank
It's
you,
been
Tammi.
amazing. I've really enjoyed it.
Again, thank you, Tammi, for the return. Let's not make it 4 years next time.
Yeah.
Let's not. That's a really good idea. I would love to be a recurring guest for sure. Ask me anytime.
Wonderful.
Thank
That's so
you.
great. And thank you all to our listeners for joining us again for another episode
Yeah.
of the Spa Girls podcast. That's it for now, but we'll see you again next time.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, bye.
Bye.